If you do any prospecting with LinkedIn, you have got to go get set up with Surf. That's SURFE. It's a tool you can use to add new contacts to your CRM system directly from LinkedIn in seconds. I'm using it every single day. I add contacts, follow my deals, keep track of notes, and it ends up saving me a bunch of time on prospecting and outreach, which means I can spend more time moving my deals along. The data is always 100% accurate since I don't have to copy and paste all the fields over from each and every contact that I want to put in my CRM. Instead, Surf does that all automatically with just one click in about 60 seconds. The team over at Surf has put together a very special offer for fans of sales players. There's a link down in the show notes, and you can use the promo code JWSurf5. Don't forget the E at the end of Surf. That's JWSurf5 for 5% off your first year. Don't spend another minute doing things manually. Go get set up with Surf. What's going on, sales players? I have a very special guest lined up for today's episode. Joining me on the show today is Vince Beese. Vince is the founder of Sales HQ. Sales HQ is actually a co-selling community built for high-performing sales reps. In fact, it's an in-person venue that fulfills the demand that we're feeling right now of more in-person interaction, especially with other top performers and potential mentors and things like that. So Vince is going to go into detail in today's episode about how he came up with this idea, why there's such a huge demand for this, and how he's planning to go to market with his new company. And in addition to that, I should mention that Vince and I go back a little ways. He was actually my direct manager and one of the best that I've had in my career. He was not only a great coach and leader, but he's a hell of a closer himself. And I learned a ton working with him and negotiating deals alongside of him. So we get into his career background. He's been at some brands like LivePerson, SugarCRM, Experian, and Meta. So without further ado, here's Vince. Thanks so much for joining me on the show today. We were just talking off air that it might be helpful. First of all, we've known each other for a while now, but it might be helpful for the listeners to hear a little bit about your background, your career, and how the hell you got into this crazy business of technology sales.
Well, how much time do we have?
Oh, well, we've got as much time as you want. But
okay, well, I'm going to probably use it up on this intro. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
Let me give you the highlights, right? So I lucked into technology and sales by circumstance, right? Like I think most salespeople and sales leaders, I don't think most of us actually get into this career by going to school or knowing that we wanted to do this. I think it just happens. And that's what happened for me, right? I was working at Billboard magazine, which is the magazine that puts out, the top 50 and all that stuff. And they happened to open up an electronic publishing department. And I'm like, what does that mean? It means we take the magazines, we put them online. And that's how I got started in technology. It just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And the internet thing started becoming real and so on. And then same thing with my first sales career. I got the VP of sales role at LivePerson when they were a company of 10 people, because I knew somebody that went there that became the president. And he said, hey, you want to be a head of sales? I said, I actually never headed up a sales organization. He goes, that's great, because there's only one person. You'd be the second person. So, I was fortunate. I got some lucky breaks along the way and parlayed, Billboard magazine, electronic publishing to LivePerson. LivePerson, I got to understand what it was like to work at a startup. And for me, going from also a bigger company like AT&T previously to a startup, I now understood what the difference was. So I wanted to be at startups the rest of my career. So from LivePerson on, I consistently made moves to early stage growth companies in technology.
Let's go back to the LivePerson, because that's super interesting. I think most listeners should at least be familiar with what LivePerson is. And I actually didn't realize you were that early there. That is really incredible. Was that connection from a coworker, or were you networking in other ways to find the president that got you in on the VP of sales role?
So I was working at AT&T WorldNet, which was their ISP at the time. One of my big clients was the president over at a media company that was serving up our ads. he had left that company after they went IPO and joined this little tiny startup in Manhattan called LivePerson.
Wow.
And soon after leaving, he tapped me on the shoulder. He said, "Hey man, I'm over at LivePerson. Do you want to come in here and head up sales?" So we had a good working relationship, right? Like, 24/7 Media was the name of the company. We became their biggest customers. You can imagine, being AT&T. So, look, I took care of them. He took care of me. We had a good relationship. He saw how I operated, and he must have saw something in me that said that I could build something, right? So, yeah, that's how that started.
So I don't get a lot of VP of sales that come into a company that grows to be like LivePerson. So I'm gonna ask a couple more questions here, because I've always wondered what goes into, like, what happened day one. You walk in the door as a LivePerson in New York, and you've got some selling experience. You clearly have the personality to sell, but how do you start to sort of plot out your operating process for scaling a team like LivePerson? Give us just I think a lot of listeners always wonder that too. Like, what goes into building a team from the ground up that later becomes LivePerson, publicly traded company, very well known in the space?
Yeah. First of all, you got to understand, I left at the time AT&T, which had hundreds of thousands of employees across the globe. Probably, I think at the time, the largest shareholder company in the world. And I walk into this little loft in Manhattan where literally there's 10 employees sitting out on the floor, right? So I think the first day, Jesse, I'll be honest with you, I walked in this creaky floors and all that shit. I don't even think I had a laptop at that point. I think they're like, "Hey, we ordered it. It's not here yet." And I got introduced to the team, and then it was like, okay. Yeah. It was like literally they threw me in the pool and they said, "Go figure it out." And I had one salesperson, and he thought of himself as a co-founder, but he wasn't a co-founder. So I had to deal with a personality issue of like, who you think you are as a VP of sales when I've already been here. And I'm like, dude, we're two people. Like, what are you talking about? So what did I do? I rolled up my sleeves and I started selling. I literally started picking up the phone, answering emails. I learned what they did. I learned firsthand how to sell this stuff. And quite frankly, that lesson taught me well wherever I went from an early stage sales organization. Was, I don't care what you have. I don't care if you don't have anything. I'm going to go figure it out myself anyway. And as you know, even at customer, right? When I started the enterprise segment, we weren't going after that. I had to go out and sell. So I think for anyone listening out there, whether you're an individual contributor or you're a sales leader, if you're going to an early stage company, you better be wanting and willing to get your hands dirty to figure it out, because you can't bring a playbook with you into an early stage company. There's no such thing as one playbook. That's complete bullshit, right? Like, you got to figure it out on the fly and constantly iterate. So we went from me and this other guy to all of a sudden I look up, we have 10 people in this room, and the phones are buzzing and we're just creating havoc and closing deals. It was very transactional. It was like, the minimum order was like 5 seats or something like that, or $1,500 a month. I can't remember exactly, but we're the godfathers of live chat. I mean, we're the ones who really created the category, right? So we're making all this noise in the industry and the phone's running off the hook. And in 14 months after being there, we're going IPO. Yeah. So April of 2000, we're public. We're either going public or we're going out of business. Because at that time, the dot-com bust was happening. Yeah. And our customers were going out of business left and right. And so all of a sudden we're like, oh shit, we better raise this money, or I don't know if we're going to survive. And we did. We went public, and my daughter just happens to be born like just around that time, so she wouldn't allow me to go to the NASDAQ to ring the bell. So
she's never going to live that down.
I was like, well, let's weigh the options. Like, do I want to stay married? And
yeah, or ring the bell on the NASDAQ. No, that's a great story. I had not actually heard that whole story before. And yeah, for anyone who doesn't have the context, LivePerson is really the reason we have web chat on websites now. And that's of course evolved quite a bit since then, but still that is the origin for web chat on a business website, was LivePerson. Tell us about, and that's, I want to actually go back to the fact that you were talking about the importance of a leader being able to come into a company and still sell. Because that's something that in our time working together, I really observed was very few of the leaders in my career were willing to roll their sleeves up and say, it's time for me to be involved in this too. If I'm going to, be the sales leader, I need to have some accountability in the deals getting done. I need to have visibility into the deals, and I need to peer with the folks that are on my level. And you really do that in a way that I'd never seen done before, which was why it was so fun working with you, because we just nerded out on the game of selling and like the strategy. Yeah. It's fun. So tell us kind of how that evolved throughout the rest of your career after LivePerson. And did you ever go back to carrying a bag, or were you always in a leadership role since then?
I remember reading an article a bunch of years ago by Jason Lemkin, and he talked about the different types of sales leaders. And I thought it was really interesting and spot on because, for one example, there's the sales leader that sits in the corner office and looks at spreadsheets all day. And then he gave all these different descriptions. And I immediately identified the one I was, which is the client-facing sales. Like, look, I love salespeople and I enjoy working with them and all that. But if you don't hear it directly from the market, you kind of really can't do your job. What your job is to remove obstacles and to coach up and motivate your team. But if I'm constantly getting fed by the sales team of what's happening and I don't really know because I'm not hearing it directly, I think you kind of lose perspective. Yeah. And so one, I love engaging with the client. I love selling. That's the reason why I think at a company of a certain size, sales leaders should be doing that. Of course, you get to the huge, like Salesforce of the world, it's a different story. But that's number one. If you're at a startup and you're a sales leader, you better be out there client facing. And then, I think it's like, it makes me like, how can I really tell Jesse how to sell something if I haven't really sold it before, or I wasn't there next to you selling? Like, just because I sold maybe 10 years ago doesn't mean I know what I'm talking about today. You know what I mean? Like, it's the same people on LinkedIn that talk about sales. If you're not doing it today yourself, I appreciate your opinion and your perspective, but doing it and teaching it are two different things, right?
Yeah, 100%. So one topic that I want to hit on with you is, it sounds like you probably spent most of your career working in an office. It sounds like with LivePerson, it was a small office, grew to a big office.
Yeah.
This is something we've talked about a lot offline. It's something I've talked about on the show before, which is we're here in 2023, almost 2024. And if you're a, younger or a newer seller, you may have not had an opportunity to go work in an office, either as a startup or even as a big company. You might be a fully remote employee and you're working from your home office in the middle of the country somewhere. And I've talked about how I feel like it was because I lived in Austin and was able to go work for a bunch of startups where I was sitting next to the founders or the sales leaders or even the product or engineering leaders, that I learned a lot quicker than I would have if I would have had to do everything through Zoom or Slack. Talk to us a little bit about, what you're working on right now, because I know you're working on a solution for this, and I want to hear a little bit about the business and the idea and the concept for it.
I think what you said is really powerful, right? Like, you had that experience. That you've worked remote for a lot of your career, but you've also worked in the office, and the difference of the dynamic. And look, I am not here to tell you that everybody needs to be back to an office 5 days a week. But what I am here to tell you is that there is a difference between working 100% remote and spending some time in some office with colleagues, with your management, with your coach, whoever, to your customer, et cetera, right? And I think we're losing, people that used to do it are losing perspective on that, the dynamic. And folks coming up through the ranks now, if they've never done it, well, they haven't even experienced it. And my point is that I think that anyone that is 100% remote is, at the end of the day, not going to be as not productive, not efficient. They're not going to perform as high level as they would if they were in, at minimum, a hybrid or some cadence where they're going in to collaborate and meet with other people.
Yeah,
I've been posting a lot, I've been speaking a lot about that. It seems to be hitting a nerve and people seem to be resonating with that.
Yeah, I look back and if anything, just the learnings, because I don't know, I think I could have maybe accomplished some of the same things I've done in my career, but it maybe would have taken twice as long if I had only done that through Zoom or Slack or remote tools, I just feel like I accelerated my learning. And when you learn, the faster you learn certain concepts in sales, the better you can perform because you can implement those quicker, and those will help you close deals faster. They'll help you, up level the deal sizes that you're closing and help you work with a broader range of clients. And then I think it just helps when you're in person, at least more often, because you kind of hear a bit more about the health of the business you work for. You get exposed to more of the kind of leadership conundrums and challenges that they're facing. And I look back and I say, man, I can't imagine if I were starting my career today, how I would level up without the ability to go and sit next to, one, my peers, and two, my leaders who were part of, investing in my knowledge and expertise in the field. So,
yeah. And I think the cohort we're talking about, right? Sellers, right?
Yeah.
Tend to be extroverted, right? Crave human face-to-face interaction, right? They thrive off the energy of others that are like-minded like them, right? So, man, I agree with you. Imagine graduating college or starting your first sales role and your onboarding's 100% remote.
Yeah.
You start selling 100% remote, and maybe within 3 or 4 months, you come face-to-face with some other people that work at the company, but like you were left on an island for a period of time. So I think the impact of 100% remote is, I think, first of all, there's an epidemic in this country, and it's called loneliness. And this remote working environment is not helping that. We know what loneliness medically leads to, and it's not good, right? So as human beings, we crave interaction. So that's number one. It's not good. That second thing is from a company culture standpoint, right? If you don't come together as a company, whatever your cadence is, quarterly, monthly, whatever, you're not really you really don't feel the company culture unless you're together, right? I mean, look what we had with when we customer, we finally went off and did that retreat and what it felt like and how great it was, right? It was impactful for the entire company. So you lose company culture, you really don't have it. And to me, it's the biggest thing is I go back to performance. Like, yeah, people out there listening will say, well, Vince, I'm at 100% of quota or 120%. Great. Maybe you should have been 150%. Maybe you should have been 200%, or someone who was 60%. Maybe they could have been 80%, because it goes back to that energy level of feeling and thriving and learning and hearing. It's like you went and grabbed a cup of coffee and you bumped into a colleague and you started talking about a specific deal you had and a challenge you ran into, or you were having a conversation with a prospect and someone overheard it. And right after the conversation said, hey man, I heard you said that one thing. What I would have said is that. And I get, we have Gong and all these other great tools. They're all awesome. Don't get me wrong, but there's nothing better than that real-time interaction and feedback and coaching and dialogue and all that stuff. Right. And besides that, Jesse, we didn't meet until about a year after we worked at the company together, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was bizarre. It was like when we first met, I remember meeting the team for the first time, like, hey, I'm Vince. Like, this is like, yeah, I know. I see you on Zoom.
Yeah.
And the last thing it's causing is, I don't care how extroverted you are, there's this weird social tension when you finally get together with people that you've been working with for a while, right? So
it's very bizarre. It really is something else.
Like, you started a new company. Have you met all your colleagues yet?
No way. And unfortunately, I just missed their company on site, which was a few weeks before I started. So I won't be able to I won't be able to do it until probably next summer.
So your onboarding was 100% remote.
All remote. Yep. Yeah. It's interesting. It's challenging too. I've been really lucky. I've had a couple of colleagues come out here to where I'm at in Phoenix to do on-sites. And so I have met a few people in person, but I mean, a few of many. And it is. It's really awkward when you do finally meet in person. Like you said, there's a big tension that kind of exists there.
This episode is sponsored by Apollo, a tool that's helping me to open doors and close deals faster. Wanted to share it with you. Apollo is a complete end-to-end sales platform, letting you email, dial, connect on social, build plays, and schedule meetings. With conversational intelligence transcribing my calls lately and reminding me to act on my next steps to drive deals across the finish line, it's been a lifesaver. It's no wonder Apollo is the most loved sales tool on the planet. Thousands of users rank Apollo as a top tool on G2. Start today completely free and see how Jesse and I use Apollo Sign up in the show notes below or at thesalesplayers.com/Apollo. That's thesalesplayers.com/APOLLO to start your free trial.
Yeah. It's like dating from afar, for a period of time. And you're like, wow, I wonder if I'm really gonna like her. And then, it's funny, you get a kick out of this. Like when I first met a lot of colleagues from customer, they said, man, you're a lot more charismatic in person than you're on Zoom. I'm like, well, I'm on fucking Zoom. Like, what do you want me to do? I don't even want to be on Zoom all day. Like, who wants to be on Zoom for an hour with a team meeting? It's redundant and tedious. You know what I mean?
I get really exhausted when it's like a week full of back-to-back Zooms will wear me out way more than if I had a week of on-sites where I'm moving around, I'm changing my environment, but me staring into a box for 8 hours a day for an entire week, it nukes you. It's terrible.
So you want to know a solution to all this?
Let's hear the solution.
And I had this idea 5 years ago in 2018, and it's pretty simple in its concept. I call it co-selling.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically we work, but for sellers and sales teams to come together and creating an environment, a community specifically for high-performing sellers. So for some people, it's someplace they go once a week. For some people, it's a couple days a week. For some people, it's where they go every day of the week. For some people, it's just where they have big meetings. And for some teams that are regional, it's where they collaborate. It's where they hang out. It's where they are stationed. And here I live in the Raleigh-Durham area, and there's thousands of enterprise sellers that are 100% remote that could now go to this place, and they don't work with these other people, but they have more in common with these people that will be in what I call sales HQ than they do with people in their company. So my point is, I want to build this community of high-performing sellers where they have a home to come to when they need to, whatever frequency they want. It's completely obviously up to you how often you want to come, to help them thrive, right? To get over all the things we just talked about. Imagine even you doing your onboarding, though that isn't your company. You could do your onboarding from there and feel like you're more part of a sales organization while you're going through it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So how would it work? I mean, it's obviously much more than just a coffee venue, right? Where you're meeting up with other like-minded people. Yeah. What's the structure of it? What would a day in the life look like if I were a seller that was part of a community like that?
Yeah, I think the first thing is most important is the actual environment, right? The actual space itself. It's conducive to this sort of environment. So as you imagine, like most modern day offices, like the mock-up you see behind me, you have open spaces where you could just hang out and grab a cup of coffee and do some work. Or if you need to be more private, you could go to a private office, or the concept, Jesse, of a phone booth. I've got a call at 2 o'clock. I got to do a demo. I need some privacy. My point is that it's your home. Do what you want, where you want. Go into a conference room, go into a phone booth, stay on a shared, a hot seat, what we call, right? Or just hang at the bar and have a cup of coffee with folks. Use it however you feel comfortable, makes you feel good. Come in on Wednesdays, come in on Monday through Friday, right? So the difference is this isn't forced work, return to work. This is by choice. And here's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
When we were fortunate, we were a customer in Meta, we got a stipend that we could use for career development, for professional development. And by the way, a lot of companies out there, even startups, provide some level of compensation for that. This isn't just a place where I'm going to hang out like a WeWork. This is a place to continue your development. So we'll have events out of there, right? Educational events, speaker events, things like that. So this isn't necessarily even something that you should have to pay for. Your company should have to pay for it, because guess what? Goes back to my original point. It's going to make you perform better.
Yeah.
Isn't that what your company wants? You want your employees to be happy. They want them to feel that they're contributing, and they want you to perform at the highest level you possibly can.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that makes sense, but at the end of the day, what I would like to leave you with is I'm just trying to create a community, right? Somewhere that you feel comfortable, that you walk in, it feels right. It's kind of, remember back in the day, for those of us out there that went to a sales pit, like the energy and all that came with it, right? Airplanes flying through the air, someone throwing something at somebody, someone yelling across the, you know what I mean? It was just like a buzz, man. You felt it when you walked in.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it does. There's a serious energy. And again, extroverts, you've got to have those audibles that you're not getting right now because people aren't going to take time to Slack call you and deliver an audible. Like you can only get that from sitting at the water cooler or the coffee bar and saying, "Hey, I heard that last call you were on. One thing to consider is you don't want to use language like that. That's going to weaken your posture. Here's how to strengthen your posture on a negotiation call." Right. So I think having that would be super valuable. Talk to us a little bit about like what some of the other perks might be for being part of something like that. It's what, let's say here's the scenario. Let's say I want to go sell my current employer on funding my subscription to this. What do I tell them in addition to like, hey, I'm going to be a more productive seller? Maybe not even more productive, but I might be I'll be a better seller. I'll get more real-time feedback on things. I'll be part of the kind of energy and inertia that needs to exist to do more deals. What else can I tell them are selling points for being part of this?
It's a great question. It's a fair question. And I've done, by the way, surveys on this to people, right, to get their opinion. What's most important? And when I do the survey, besides cost is always, but by the way, for those selling out there, cost is important, regardless of what you're selling. Like, oh, if the price doesn't matter, like bullshit, price always matters, okay? You salespeople out there, when you answered my survey, you said cost was number one. So don't buy that bullshit that price doesn't matter. It matters 100% of the time and twice on Sunday. Jesse, the number two thing that people said that they wanted from this co-selling space, sense of community. Now, well, how do you translate that back to your company again? Like, my point before again is like, yeah, these people around you may not be your colleagues at the company you work with, but they do the same profession that you do. So number one, on a daily basis, if you're in there, you are going to learn something new. But that's more informal. More formally, what we're going to do is, like I said, we're going to have different series from education standpoint. Like Wednesday night, we'll have a speaker series. Every Wednesday at 5:00, we'll come in, do a happy hour, have a speaker about some sort of topic that will come in. We'll have training sessions. So these might be free, some might be paid. Like we'll have a professional trainer that has a series on whatever the community says are most important things, like could be cold calling techniques or whatever it might be out of there. I think it'll be a great destination for others for sales kickoffs and other training type of things where you're looking for a destination to bring your team. This might be a great conducive area for that as well. So it is all about growing and getting better and learning from each other as a community, right? Whether they're informal or formal type of things like that. And then the last thing out of there is like, I think you and I have talked about this, whether you have a, what I'm looking for, someone you look up to, someone you went to, a mentor or a paid coach, you might find that person here as well. So an informal, hey man, you've been doing this in this industry for 20 years. You mind being my mentor? It's hard to find that person on LinkedIn where you haven't made a real connection, but you could do that in here potentially, right? So I think it's those sort of relationships that you'll start to form as well.
That's a really interesting insight because that's one of the questions that I'd say. So I've, for the listeners of the pod that reach out and the ones that are in our Slack community, that's one of the number one questions I get is, how do I find a mentor? And it's tough for me to answer because I'm like, well, my mentors early in my career came from people I worked with. They were maybe like the top seller in the field, or it was the VP of, I don't know, customer service or something in the company that was interested enough in taking me along for the ride. So those were some of my mentors early on, but I just had really close access to those people because I could just go walk over to their desk and strike up a conversation. So that's a hard question to answer. And I think that hits a really big problem on the head, which is how do you get a mentor in 2024, 2023, 2024, when, it's kind of awkward to reach out to somebody in your company on Slack and say, do you want to be my mentor? And you can't just go and, organically start a conversation with somebody. It's really hard to do.
And it's also, I don't know, you tell me if you think it's strange. I think it's strange to ask your manager if they'd be a mentor because it's, you know what I mean? Because you're looking for a really, a third-party perspective on you as a seller, as a person and all that. It's hard to get that from your direct manager. So one of the things we'll do at Sales HQ is we'll have kind of a sign-up sheet for folks that want to be mentees and mentors, right? So I volunteer to be a mentor. Great. go have coffee with this person. You both need to decide if it's the right relationship, because if you're going to go into a mentor-mentee, you got to both take it serious and put, well, how often do we want to meet? And what do we want to cover? And like, I have a coach I pay money to that coaches me on a weekly basis, and I take it super serious, and he takes it super serious. And honest to God, it's really helped me come up with this idea and formulate it and get to where I am, to have the guts to actually put it out there and do it. And this is what a good coach or a mentor does, right?
Yeah.
It gives you the confidence, instills the knowledge that you need to go out there, because what we do for a living is not easy. Otherwise, everybody would be doing. And we all need these sorts of relationships that say, Jesse, I got to tell you, man, I keep hearing you talk about this one thing and it's nothing but negative and ain't going to help you and anyone else. And you sometimes can't get that from people that you work with or that close to. You need it from someone that's, outside of that kind of circle that can help you. So yeah, it is challenging, though, to your point, to find the right person. And, it's, so.
I think this also hits on another topic of conversation I had with another colleague of mine recently, and he's a, tenured rep. He's looking to launch a sales consultancy, and his observation was there's just this huge black box right now for sales training and coaching. And you kind of touched on it a little bit. You pay a coach. I'm assuming that's like an executive coach, but a lot of people don't think to do that. And, you'll pay a personal trainer to help you lift more weights or lose 30 pounds or whatever it is. But a lot of us don't realize we should probably be paying somebody as well. You really got to invest in yourself. And that's another question I get from my community a lot is, hey, everyone's always talking about investing in yourself. What does that actually mean? And, my response to that is usually, well, do you have a coach that's either teaching you sales or business or some other, career pursuit that you're after? A lot of times you've got to pay somebody to get that access to that information. And it's not just because you have to pay them. It's because when you start to actually put skin in the game, you're more likely to achieve the goal. If you're paying a personal trainer to help you lose 30 pounds, you're more likely to lose that weight because you've got money on the line, not just the desire to lose the weight. You've got the money on the line, and you've got someone who's holding you very accountable to that. And so I think the same works in a sales career. If you really want to get good at this, if you really want to develop insights that you're not going to get anywhere else for free, you got to actually go find a coach to do that. And so I do think this idea lends itself more to that mentoring, whether that's free or paid coaching, because it creates an actual physical environment.
It's return on investment of yourself. Whatever you make a year, are you willing to take 10% of whatever you make and invest in yourself? Whether it be coaching or classes or whatever it is, that's money well spent. Yeah. Period. End of story. You can't always expect you're going to get that from your company or your management or your direct boss, right? You've got to make that. And by the way, salespeople make a pretty good amount of money. Enterprise sellers out there, how much they can make, right? I mean, It's not an insignificant amount of money. So maybe in your case, it's not even 10%, but it's some dollar amount that you say, I'm going to invest this in myself every year for whatever you think it's going to help to improvement. Because I will tell you, if you find the right coach or mentor or training, whatever, it's going to pay dividends big time. And don't, again, rely just on your company. And so I'll tell you one last thing. I started doing coaching my own to other sales leaders because honestly, I was selfish. It feels really good when you think you're making an impact on somebody. And that's what I always loved about sales leadership, was like, you need to go into it for the right reasons. And it's not about you, it's about them and how you're going to help them be the best they can be. And it's the same thing with coaching. Like, it's the pure joy of seeing somebody come back to you and said, I talked to you about this thing last week. I did it this week. And oh my God, here's the result I had. Yeah. It's a win-win for both sides of the equation. It really is fulfilling. And I think it's, again, I'm going to beat that dog. Like, it's worth the investment. It's.
Yeah. And so you said something that I think is really interesting that should be a takeaway from this conversation is you can't rely on your company either. I know companies have good intentions. They want to train their reps up. They obviously want their reps to produce and deliver results. But if you solely rely on the training program of your day job, then you're always going to be at least middle of the pack. You're not ever going to be that stand above rep that you want to be. And I think to do that, you have to invest in yourself. You've got to invest in your community. And this is one way to do that is getting out there and putting yourself in a physical place that allows you to build that community, allows you to find those mentors or coaches. And yeah, I think that this is a big gap right now in where, unfortunately companies can't deliver this anymore. So you go and take charge of this. If this is what again, back to full circle on the conversation, because to be great in this business, to be great in sales, you have to really want to be here and play the game every day. This is a sport and we're athletes. And you've got to want that. And if you don't want that, then yeah, don't invest in this stuff. But if you want to be the best in your game and you want to make the most money possible,
high performers,
this is an easy way to do that. It's an easy and obvious way to go and invest in yourself.
How many companies have you worked at over the last 10 years, Jesse?
Oh man, I lost count. There's a
More
couple
than 5?
Yeah,
5?
Probably about 5. Yeah.
So about it, you're about every 2 years you start a new job, correct? Something like that?
Give or take. Yeah.
And you're good at what you do. My point is, the people listening out there, is that you got to look at yourself, like what Jesse said, as a free agent athlete. And if you're not training in the off season, every off season, right? Or during the season,
yeah,
you're not going to be the best at your craft, period, end of story. That's why we are. And matter of fact, there's a lot of sellers out there now that are just that, like for sale sellers. They'll go in there, do this for a year, knock shit out, get it done, and move on. Mm-hmm. And so that really tells me that this is a real professional path for a lot of people, because it's like a wide receiver or a running back, right? We're a skilled position, right? That can translate to a lot of companies, but you got to keep running. You got to keep training. And if you're not, you lose your edge.
So I know you're opening the pilot location in Raleigh. Is that right?
That's correct.
What's the roadmap for kind of future outposts for folks like myself who are not based in Raleigh, I should say. That's wrong. But yeah, so what's the vision there, or is there one baked out yet fully? Tell us about what to expect there. And then follow on to that question would just be, for anyone listening right now who wants to learn more about it and either get on the wait list or sign up, how do they find that information out there on the web?
Yeah. Wow. Boy, man, you make me more nervous now. Like I think first things first is I want to prove the model here, because this is where I am, right? And I'll be working out of there personally because I need that. So to me, the vision first is let's get the model, let's figure out the right environment, and then let's replicate that in other areas that where it's conducive and it makes it sense, meaning the business commercial real estate market in a lot of areas has come way down. There's lots of inventory, even outside of places like San Francisco and New York. So to me, it's like, what are the other communities that kind of look like Raleigh that have a good amount of remote sales workers? And that's where we should pinpoint these locations, right? And the vision ultimately is they're all tied together. So if I do an event on a Wednesday in the Raleigh location, well, why can't that be broadcast to the other locations as well to join in that, or vice versa, another location, and so forth. And then, and with that, then we're building this national global network, and then we can get together on a quarterly, annual basis, so specifically for this genre of people. So it's building a community, which takes a lot of time and effort to be able to do such. So let's start with the first one, see how that goes, and then I'll put one in your backyard next, Jesse, because you asked. So you'll be the second city.
I think Phoenix, Austin, there's a lot of good remote cities that
I already had some of Austin say, if I had a location like this, I'd be there tomorrow. Because what I want people to understand is, like, I'm not talking about co-working with WeWork and the other locations. And I have nothing wrong with them, but they all say, oh, community. But you walk in there, it's a guy sitting on a couch with headphones on that wants nothing to do with you. Matter of fact, he finds you annoying because you're one of those sales guys that talk on the phone all the time, right? In my place, you're walking around with headphones on, talking, walking around, having a cup of coffee and so on. And it's completely normal, right? We're no longer the freaks at the company.
Right. That's how it should be. Yeah. You can't go to a co-working space and expect to network with people. People are there to work quietly and finish their lines of code.
That's the difference. You go to WeWork to get quiet because your home or apartment's noisy. I'm in my basement. There's no one here. I want to go to get to the noise. It's the opposite, right?
Oh. Well, awesome. So for listeners out there, how can they get in touch with you directly? What's the best place to follow you or connect or email?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn always is the best. And I'm the only Vince Beese on LinkedIn. So easy to find, like not like a John Smith. I'm also launching the website, depending on when this broadcast, when the show pops up. It's going to be saleshq.co. So not com, saleshq.co.
Yeah. Okay. We will put that in the show notes, and hopefully by the time this goes live, that's live. Awesome, man. Any final words of wisdom you'd like to leave to the listeners?
I mean, let's face the realities. We're coming near the end of the year. It's probably been, for some people, a tough year out there. You're not the only one. Go do some things that are gonna, for next year, better yourself, improve yourself. Always spend the time and the money on yourself to improve, because if you put into this sales career, it will pay off dividends. It's kind of like if you're in athletics and you're a golfer, you can play for the rest of your life if you do it right. So invest in yourself, I'd say.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for coming on and sharing. Loved having you as a guest, and looking forward to seeing where this goes.
All right, man. Thank you for having me.